You're listening to Be Still and Grow, the GCC Ladies Podcast with Catherine,
Heather, and Nicole, where we dive into deep theological topics and real-life issues through the art of conversation.
So take a seat at the table with us.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hello, and welcome to the Be Still and Grow podcast. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Yeah.
Morning.
I don't think y'all are ready for that. Let's start it again.
From the top.
Yeah, from the top. Well, good morning, ladies. How are we doing today? It is actually a good morning. I can actually say that. Oh, I don't think I've ever said that. Now that I'm saying this, so we're recording in the morning time, and so it's weird. Why do I ever say good night then? Good night, ladies.
We could end it with that in the future.
Yeah, that is true. Interesting. So, we have some guests today, y'all.
We sure do.
Y'all know who they are? Y'all have any guesses? Any
I heard it was you two.
They were busy. We tried. Bono
We'll
had
settle
some,
for the heavy hitters instead.
Yes, we will settle. So yes, we have two guests on the podcast today. We have pastor of the church that we all attend, Gospel Community Church, Kirk McDonald.
Woo, woo.
And we have Tim Bice, the pastor of Greenbriar Church in Albany, Georgia, the church that we all not attend. Well, welcome, guys. Welcome on the
Thank you.
podcast.
Good to be here. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, we are super excited for y'all to be here. Did I mess it up, Albany? Did I
No,
do it
it
again? Okay.
was great.
I even had to slow it down in my mind because, like, there are different sayings. So, if you're Gospel Community Church that we go to is in Fayetteville. So, if you've been to Fayetteville for a long time, we don't enunciate it. So, you just say Fayetteville. That's it. And so people are like, "What? You saying like Fayetteville? What is that?" And so, if you're not from here, they enunciate and they go, "We're from Fayetteville." And so, but if you're a long-time person here, you don't do that. We also have a neighboring city called Sonoya. But if you're a native of Sonoya, they say Sonoy, which makes zero sense. Sorry if you're from Sonoya, but that's just crazy to me. So it's like, it's not even how it's spelled. Yeah. And so I've never understood that. So
It's the weird thing.
I definitely say Fayetteville, so my bad. But
No,
you're
it's
fairly
fine.
short-time
Yeah.
resident.
no, it's not a bad thing. But I feel like you probably get that all the time hearing about the Albany. How's it? Is that annoying?
Oh, yeah. Especially when someone new to your church from Michigan comes and calls it Albany. And then you correct them 400 times and you're like, whatever. That's fine. Albany. Yeah. It's okay.
You just lower your expectations.
Yeah.
That's
at
right.
that point.
Yeah.
Well, even like McDonough, I was just thinking too. People say McDonough,
McDonough.
and so I say McDonough. I could care less, whatever which way is right.
Yeah.
It is the way I would like to say it. So I mean, I know. No, are you from McDonough or no?
From McDonough.
That's what I thought. Okay, do you say McDonough or McDonough?
McDonough.
Okay, so you say it the right way. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, but
you
Kirk
can read.
enunciates everything.
Oh,
I do.
okay.
He thinks about it.
Oh,
So do you say
okay.
Fayetteville?
I say Fayetteville. Yes,
Mm.
I do. And I do enunciate. It's very strange. I think it came in high school when there was like the whole like redneck crowd. And I didn't I was a musician, painting my fingernails black and stuff like that. So I didn't want to be associated with them. So I didn't want to talk like this, like they did.
Like me. He didn't want to talk like me.
I don't want to talk like Tim Bice does.
Like you from Albany.
So
That's right.
I started enunciating everything that I say so that I wouldn't have that kind of accent. But
And now God, he's using it.
man, he is. Well, now I'm proud to be a redneck. I'm happy. Drive a truck, wear boots. Love
Don't
it.
have to talk like one.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, that makes me feel better. I feel like it's like y'all the enunciating side. I just mess up words every time I get on here, and they're like, "I don't think that's how you say it," and so I'm like, "It's the way I want to say it." So it's like we as Southern people like to make up our own words, and we like to mesh them together. So America. So, but like I said, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast today. We're excited to have you guys. Like I said, they are pastors, so we're gonna kind of get into this here. Are y'all big on putting jokes in sermons? Do y'all like doing it? Do y'all do it? Does it work? Y'all have a great joke that like, hey, this is like my favorite joke I've ever said. I was telling Nicole earlier, and I'm so mad at myself that I can't remember. So you said a joke a couple months ago, Kirk, that was so funny. And it was like I laughed so good, but I don't remember what it is, and it drives me crazy. So I don't know if you can just take a moment, go through all your sermons past few months, tell me which
Most
one it
recent
is.
best joke.
Which whatever I laugh at the most, that's it. So, but I can't remember, and it's driving me absolutely bonkers. It'll hit me eventually, but I think you do some pretty good jokes. But y'all have any good jokes that really just like killed?
I don't intentionally put jokes in my sermons.
Okay.
If I ever say
Like,
anything
I'm
funny,
naturally funny.
no, no, I'm not. And that's why I don't write jokes in my sermons, because I know I'm not funny. I don't try. It's embarrassing. So if I do say anything funny in a sermon, it just happened.
The grace of the Lord.
It's the grace of God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you're this way. I'm so focused on making sure that I'm clear and that the gospel is presented, that there's application given, that there's good, solid illustrations. I'm not thinking about jokes. In the moment, it happened. It happened the last time I preached. I think Chris showed you the video of it, actually.
Mhm.
But we were teaching on womanhood and manhood, and I'm in Genesis 2, and I just pulled it up. When Adam, God took the rib from Adam, made woman, and brought her to the man, I said, and he said, come here. And like the whole congregation just howled. I'm like, is that funny? Like, I don't know. But yeah, I don't mess with that.
Yeah. So I told a story from C.S. Lewis' book, The Great Divorce, about the guy who gets transformed. And it really just happened. Like I built the story up, and then like right at the climax, when I was about to explain the fullness of the transformation, right before I did, I stopped and said, "You got to go read the book." And like I acted like I wasn't going to tell the climax. And then I got a big laugh out of that. But that wasn't in my notes at all. It was totally unintentional. Just in the moment, it was like, "You got to go read the book." No, I'm just kidding. I'll tell you. And then I told it, and I got a big laugh out of that. But
Yeah, I think for preachers, like we understand that every sermon has a tone.
Yeah.
And I think you can have freedom to be lighthearted, but to like write in your jokes to sermon, I just feel like it can be inappropriate. I'm not saying it's bad. I don't try to do that.
Yeah, I think if somebody came and said, in my introduction, I've got this hilarious joke that I wrote in there, I wouldn't be like, "You sinner, you are making a mockery of the word of God and preaching." Like, it's just, I think any good preacher has to figure out how to be themselves in the pulpit. Like artists talk about finding their voice, musicians talk about finding their voice, and I think any good preacher will work hard at that. And if you're just naturally funny and you can write like that, do it. If you're being yourself in the pulpit. But that's not me. Like I'm not naturally funny. I can't sit down and write comedy. So I just don't do it. But I think it's a part of just being who God made you to be in the pulpit in that moment.
Yeah, I agree.
There's never a time, even in the beginning, y'all ever like intentionally wrote in a joke.
I may have.
Yeah, I may have. I just don't make a habit
I don't
of
think
it.
about it. Yeah, I don't.
Was there any time you tried to be funny and it did not go well?
Yeah, I mean, I've said stuff in the moment, that just totally fell flat, which reminded me, hey, don't do that. That's not you. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I do remember the other Sunday, I think you were talking about how we're not born perfect, and like you called out your mom. I feel like we always laugh when he calls out his mom, who sits, front row. And I'm sure sometimes preaching can be kind of hard in front of your mom, I would imagine. Yeah, I felt like we were like all rolling that Sunday. It was like, because it's just relatable, it just becomes real life at that point. And I feel like that's one of the reasons both of you are great pastors, is because you're just so relatable, and we don't feel like you are up here and we're all, under some little peasant sinners, that we're all on the same foot of the cross. So
Yeah, that was I was preaching the rich young ruler. So Jesus is like, you know what you need to do. Follow the commandments. He starts listing off the commandments. Obey your mother and father. And the rich young ruler says, "Oh yeah, I've done that from the beginning." And so like my mom's right there. Like my mama is sitting on the front row, and she loves me. She loves to hear me preach. She's here every Sunday, a member of our church. But she knows I ain't done that. I've not obeyed her from the beginning. So
Low hanging fruit.
yeah, it was easy. It was an easy joke to make.
Yeah.
like I said, when I was trying to remember that one joke you said, I couldn't remember, but the only thing that kept coming to my mind, you said it a few months ago when you were talking about, I think it was Tally you were talking about, and you were talking about the toy that you're like, listen, like if you lose this toy, that's on you. You know, you got to keep this toy or whatever. It's like, I'm not going to look for it anymore until you lose this thing. And then you're like, and then that night I was out there with my flashlight looking for this toy again.
Yeah.
Real life.
Yeah.
I love that. I thought that that is, I don't know why that stuck with me, but like I thought that was absolutely hilarious. So
Yeah. Yeah. And that was like, that's another timing joke too. Because it was like, I emphatically said, I'm not looking for this toy ever again. You lost it. That's it. It's over. So then I was out there looking for the toy.
Right.
It was like, so, I mean, yeah, that's just being humorous through timing, not necessarily the content. It wasn't like a setup punchline joke, it was just the timing of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's good. I mean, it brings a different dynamic to the sermons, and especially like I think you were saying like certain sermons are fine for it, like if they're lighthearted or anything. But I think saying certain jokes in a very dark or hard sermon might not be as good or received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think like what Tim said just a minute ago, there's so much that we're trying to accomplish in the sermon.
Yeah.
That, I don't know. It's really complicated. Like people look at it, I think, it's like, oh, you just get up there and, talk for 40 minutes, like it's not that hard. It's like, okay.
No, I've got 20 hours in this thing.
Yeah, we've put 20 hours in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And everything that you're trying to accomplish, display the main idea, exegete the text, apply the text, glorify Christ, make sure it's gospel centered, make sure the application is applicable to the people, to your audience. I mean, there's 1,000 things going on.
Answering people's questions that you think they may be thinking.
Yes. Yeah. Answering
Good
anticipated.
introduction. Get them on the train in the beginning.
Mhm. Yeah.
Good conclusion.
Yeah. You got to land the plane.
And keep it under 40 minutes.
Yeah. Do that in 40 minutes. And
'Cause
so,
we're hungry.
yeah.
Right.
So humor to me is just kind of an afterthought.
Same.
I love it though. I feel like when you laugh together, there's just some kind of connection. And so when the whole congregation is laughing, it feels like you're just sitting together with your family. And the friendships and the bonds and laughing together, I think is super important.
Yeah. To me. And I like too, it's like sometimes when you don't expect it, it's just kind of like you're listening to the sermon, and like when you're talking about the tally thing, or like you just don't see it, and then it's just like I love it when it just hits everybody exactly the same time. I feel like at our church, PCC, it's like we all laugh at the exact same time. It's just like, it's like so like I always love it when that happens, because it's just like, oh wow, okay, I didn't see that coming, but that was great. And so I will say quickly, I think it was 2 sermons ago, you had did a eye chart. They laugh. So he did an eye chart, and so on the eye chart, so I mean it's not an eye chart, excuse me. It's like there's it's words on it. He's talking about I'm blanking, but it had different things on it. Like
It was very
PVC.
memorable.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
See
It
that?
was a talk for mini groups.
It was about the blind man couldn't see.
Yes,
But then he
yes.
was the only one that saw what
Yes.
Jesus was trying to say.
Mhm. And so, so each line got smaller and smaller and smaller. So he's going through each one. And so, as soon as you said it's a eye test, and so I accidentally was like, and because like I do not have great eyesight, and so I was like, well, I automatically failed. That's great. And so, as soon as at that moment she looks at me, busts out laughing. And then I had another girl next to me. She's like, I kind of had you in mind when I made this, and so to make it really. And then the person behind me, I was like, well, I can see the third line. And then the lady behind me was like, you drove here. And I'm like, what is happening? And then at that moment, Heather texted me. She was like, if you can't see the 5th line, this is what it says. And I was like, y'all are the worst. But it was, I don't know. It's really cool to have those, even though, I don't know, you weren't making that as super funny, but it was humorous, and I thought it was really good. So like
It was
stuck
just
with-
your community loving you to make
Yeah.
sure that you could
Yeah.
understand the
Helping
message.
you apply the text.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was I was proud of myself. I could read the 3rd line. I didn't think I could read that. So, but it was very funny that we can take those, even if like you can't see that or know that's happening. Like it's cool that they have those little funny moments and stuff. And it, like I said, we talked about it a lot in community group after that too. So it's really stuck with us. So, so please don't do any more eye tests. I don't appreciate those at all. But I was proud of myself. 3rd line, I did it. So, so I do have a joke that I looked up.
No,
It's
lol.
a sermon joke that I thought was kind of funny, and so hopefully y'all think it's funny. So, So there was a lot of sermon jokes, and they're all really long. So this was the shortest one I found. That's mainly why I went to it. And some of them were very inappropriate. Like, how are these sermon jokes? I'm like, these are clearly not. So, all right. It says, a minister told his congregation, next week I plan to preach about the sin of lying. To help you understand my sermon, I want you all to read Mark 17. The following Sunday, as he prepared to deliver this sermon, the minister asked for a show of hands. He wanted to know how many had read Mark 17. Every hand went up. The minister smiled and said, Mark is only 16 chapters.
Yeah.
That's why I looked at you guys. I will now proceed with my sermon on the sin of lying. So I thought that was hilarious. So I did think that when I read that, I was like, I wonder if they knew. Like, y'all know there's only 16 chapters? So I'm
Yes.
glad if you didn't.
We preached through Mark. I remember
I
it
was
was only
gonna say,
16
oh, yeah.
chapters.
I'm like,
So it
did
took
you
us 2
know?
years?
I did not know. I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. So I mean, I don't think I could tell you how many chapters are in every book. So, except for Psalms, it's 150, right? That made me really nervous in front of pastors. I was like, why did you say that out loud? I was like, that was terrible. Nicole, save us. Why are we here?
Well, I think that this conversation really shows how tempered and wise our leadership is, because I've sat under many a pastor who has made many an inappropriate joke from the pulpit and then asked for grace. So with that, we are here to talk about the qualifications of an elder. How do you become an elder? How do you stay an elder? And what are the benefits of healthy leadership in church?
Yes. So like I said, Kirk is the pastor of Gospel Community Church for 11 years. Tim is the pastor of Greenbriar Church for 15 years. Crazy.
How long have you been in ministry, Tim? How many years?
I was a pastor for 7 years before that, so 22.
Okay. I'm at 17.
Yeah.
I was ordained in 2006.
Yep.
It's a long time.
I was ordained in 2001.
I was in high school.
I was like, yeah, I don't know where I was at the time, but I was not my story. So yeah, that's awesome. And so y'all are also friends. So like, when did y'all meet? How did y'all meet? How are y'all friends? And like, how did that all come about?
We met through the church planting network that we're part of, Acts 29.
Which there's only 28 chapters of Acts, by the way.
Yeah, back to the Mark thing.
Yeah. We are Acts 29.
Yes.
The next chapter.
Never thought about
Sorry, go ahead.
That was all I wanted to say. That's how we met.
We're the next
Yep.
chapter.
We didn't think we'd have anything in common. I'm a little bit older.
Mm.
I mean, here's this good-looking dude all tatted up, and I'm like, yeah, we probably, but we got to know each other, and then like he's my best friend.
Oh.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the groups that we were in with Acts 29, we were like all meeting together, and it was all the several of the pastors from Georgia, and Tim had recently taken over leadership for that group just to lead us. And I think like pastors are longing for a place to be vulnerable. We're up front all the time. We feel the pressure of being very spiritual and very wise and always having the right answer and being very composed and
Our families.
yeah. Our families have to look awesome too. Our kids have to be very well behaved and all the crazy stuff, like all that stuff that gets put on pastors. Whether we want to push it off or not, we feel it 100%. And so when pastors get together, it can go one of two ways, right? So being in many pastors groups, it can go from, well, how many people do y'all have? Well, how many baptisms? It's kind of like that kind of how many baptisms, how many salvations? Oh, we just hired 5 new staff members. Oh, you only have 3. Oh, it can go that way, or there can be a real sense of honesty and transparency. And when that happens, like you can almost physically feel it in the room when all the pastors just take a big deep breath and let it out and go, oh, okay, we can be vulnerable here. Wow, I didn't know that. And I think that's what drew me to Tim so much in the beginning of our friendship, is because as he led that pastors group, it was like he was saying like real stuff, like stuff that pastors are not supposed to say about what they think about ministry, what they think about their elders, what they think about their deacons, what they think about the church budget, just like real stuff that, if you read the pastor's book, it says right there, don't say this kind of stuff. You can't be this honest. You have to be polished. You have to. And Tim just didn't do that in that room full of pastors. And I feel like every man in that room was just longing to have a place of openness and honesty and to be real and to be honest about the real struggles that pastors go through. So he opened up that door for us. And I think every man just walked right through it. And I think that's why we have such a tight group of men now in Georgia, is because of Tim's leadership and his just courageous ability to just go, no, this is really what's going on. And this is the depth of it. And for us to go, okay, we don't have to, like, we can do that here. We can be honest here. So
That's fantastic.
I would imagine that creates a lot longevity, like if you don't have to come in wearing a face and, keeping it all together, you could probably go a lot further, a lot faster, and a lot longer, I would think.
Yes.
That's incredible. That's awesome. Well, I love that, like y'all were saying earlier, like how long y'all been not only pastors of a church, but how long y'all been in ministry and stuff. So being in the ministry and also being a pastor of a church for so long, like how have y'all learned to stay healthy as pastors?
First of all, you have to know that you need to be healthy.
Mm.
I don't think I knew that until I started burning out and then realizing I'm on an unsustainable pace. And so I guess for me, it was probably about 10 years ago, I started realizing, man, I need to make some changes. I need to rest more. I need to take care of my body. I need to be healthy emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and physically. Then you have to be super proactive, intentional, have some accountability, and know what you're doing next, and stay on track. Because it is so easy to become unhealthy for so many different reasons. I feel like for me personally, and I think Kirk too, because we've talked about this a lot, there's a physical demand on your body, late hours, lots of preaching, which gets your adrenal glands going. Then you've got emotional stress. You're under constant scrutiny daily. Losing friends in your church, whether they move or leave or they're upset with you. Then you're dealing with other people's sins and problems. And as a pastor, you tend to take that on yourself. So you begin to get emotionally tired. Then mentally, we work with our minds more than we do our hands in ministry. And so it's taxing. And then spiritually, you're under constant spiritual attack. We all have an enemy, and the enemy's after us, so that the gospel is not proclaimed. And so I think, number one, you have to realize that that is true, and you need to do something about it. I think that's where I would start.
yeah, I think in the beginning, you're so excited about the work. You're fired up. You don't want to rest. You don't want to go slow. You want to go fast. And 80-hour work weeks. I mean, that's so easy to do in a church plant. It's so easy to do.
Yep.
Because if you're in the office 9 to 5, building the organization, creating organizational charts, or doing spreadsheets, or whatever you're doing, you're in the office 9 to 5, reading commentaries, writing sermons, whatever. Well, then you're meeting with your people at night. You're having dinner with your people. That's a part of how we do ministry. I know not every pastor does that, but as a part of what we believe how ministry should be done is you got to be with your people, and your people work jobs. So they're not coming in your office during the 9 to 5 hours. You're across the dinner table with them. But if you've worked a 9 to 5, and then from like 6 to 8 or 10, because some folks don't know how to go home, they're at your dinner table. Well, man, it's easy to stack that up day after day.
And
after
the
day.
breakfast appointments.
Yes. Yep.
So you start at 6
Yeah.
in the morning sometimes.
Yep.
And go till 11 at night,
Mhm.
nonstop.
Nonstop.
And you don't feel it. It's not registering especially when you're young and passionate and energetic, but it's unsustainable. No one can do that.
Yeah.
Over a long period of time.
If you do that, I had to apologize to Chelsea so much you know, and apologize to my girls so much. You know, like they're there with me, you know, when we're having dinner with folks from the church, but they're not getting my undivided attention. And the crazy thing is, like, in the striving to be a good pastor, what I was doing, like back to you talking about qualifications, like I was actually disqualifying myself by like just trying to be a good pastor, but by trying to, in my mind, trying to be a good pastor, meeting with these people all the time, neglecting my family. It's like, okay, well, now you're disqualifying yourself because you're neglecting your family. Like, okay, well, got to change that.
Yes.
Is there a time that kind of sticks out to y'all in that time of ministry that like you were saying, like realizing you had to be healthy? Like, was there a time that really struck you that like this was the moment? Like, this was year 11. I was like, shoot, I'm not doing good. You know, is there a time that kind of sticks out to you guys that you're like, this is when I realized, okay, I need to be healthy? Or was it immediately from the get go? I know I need to be healthy. I need to be doing all the things.
Year 5 for me.
Mm.
Year 5, I hit the wall hard, just crashed and burned really hard. I stayed in bed for like 3 days. Like I wasn't physically sick. I didn't have a fever or anything like that. I was just so emotionally and spiritually drained. I had nothing to give. I wanted more than anything for the Lord to release me from the call and just to be done. I wanted out. I was under so much pressure, and you know, it's like Tim saying, like, man, this is not sustainable. Like something has to change. And so that's when I started meeting with a biblical counselor. I still meet with a biblical counselor. And like Tim was just talking about that accountability. So he holds me accountable. Our elders hold me accountable. And there's just a list of things that I wrote down that Chelsea and I agreed upon. Like this is the things that we are going to commit to. So things like diet, things like exercise, things like a weekly Sabbath, specific nights that we have cordoned off that is just for our family, to where I'm going to be home. I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm not going to take phone calls. I'm just going to spend time with my wife and my girls. But we also have nights cordoned off for the church. Like these are the specific nights we're going to have people over and have people over for dinner. We're going to go. But then these other nights that are just for the family. So again, things like diet, exercise, meeting with a biblical counselor, having those like a full day of Sabbath, having a clear schedule. Because man, if you don't, in this job, if you don't set a schedule, if you're not ruling your schedule will
Absolutely.
rule you. There's always something to do. Like the
Always.
work's never done. The Lord hasn't returned, right? The Lord's not returned. So there's always something you can do. And if you don't schedule it, it'll crush you.
You have to be the head and not the tail.
Yeah.
You must be, or you won't make it. You won't survive. Making not to-do lists is a good idea. I will not do this. I will not take phone calls past this time. I don't have to go visit everyone. If it's an emergency, if something's really, really bad, I'll be there, or it can wait till tomorrow. I have a not to-do list. Same thing, same kinds of things you do. Taking a sabbatical, taking regular Sabbaths, spending time with my family. Like those now have become important, and important things are more important than the urgent things. So same kind of thing though. Like I've hit a wall 3 times. The first one was in 2015. Our church tripled in size. We bought a new building. I'm all over the place. And we had a guy in our congregation who sinned against his wife. And we're meeting in my office. I'm drained. I'm busted on all 4, mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And he got all huffy about what he did and tried to storm out of my office, and I snapped. And I grabbed him and I threw him onto the couch. And it's like standing over him, and it hit me in the moment. I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Now, we laugh about that today. God's been working in this man's life. But in that moment, I'm like, this is not who I should be ever. So I've had 2 or 3 moments. They weren't quite that bad. That was probably the worst. Another one was just lamenting to God, where I was just like, this is right after COVID. 2020 was bad during COVID. 2021 was worse. it was way worse
Yeah,
because
the
we were still,
fallout.
we're still fighting mask or no mask, vaccines, no vaccines, all this stuff. Being accused, no matter where you stood, you're going to be accused and scrutinized, and from your friends and your brothers and sisters, people that you love, you've been doing life with, you've poured your life out for, and man, like, there's a point where I just broke. I mean, just completely just broke before God. But he was so kind. He's so gracious to pull us out of those messes. But yeah, it can get tough sometimes. If you're not the head, you become the tail. It can be bad.
Yeah.
I think both of us over the years, like we've seen it consume guys, you know. The only and let me just say this, the only reason that I'm here, the only reason that Tim's here is by the grace of God. We're not better than those men. Like
Nope.
that's the thing. Like the dudes that are no longer in ministry that set out, I'm going to do this for life, and they're no longer here. That's what, like, that was a realization that I had to come to. Like, I'm not better than them. I'm not stronger than them. I'm not more mentally capable of handling the job. That's not it at all. As a matter of fact, there's a guy that I'm thinking about right now, like way better preacher than me, way smarter, way more organized. And his marriage fell apart, and he loved his wife, but that's what happened. And he's no longer in ministry. And so I think it's doing what you need to do as far as it depends on you, right? Doing what you need to do, being disciplined in walking through those healthy rhythms, but then also relying on the grace of God.
One of the graces of God for us that we both recognized is close brotherhood with other pastors that are like-minded. We are alike in our theology, and openness and transparency and vulnerability has probably kept me from quitting, if I'm honest. I have it with some of my Acts 29 brothers, and I have it with our elders. If I did not have that, there is absolutely no way I'd even be in ministry. Or I'd be in it, but I would either torn up a lot of stuff and hurt a lot of people, or I've closed my heart off to people so that I could survive. So I would say part of that grace of God is having other brothers in our lives to help hold one another accountable, encourage one another, call each other out, pray for each other, or whatever it takes.
Yeah. That's what I was literally just about to ask, is like how important it is to have the support of other pastors, not only in those times, but just in general.
I think that it's paramount.
Yeah. We were on I'm going to tell this story.
Oh, gosh. Which one?
Nothing that will
Colorado?
incriminate us.
Not the Colorado story.
We were on a pastor's retreat, and we were sitting out by a fire pit. It's just all pastors and their wives. So it was me and Chelsea were sitting there, and Tim and his wife Jay were sitting there. And I was explaining my exit strategy. Like, when I get back from this pastor's retreat, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, launch a business. I'm going to hand the church off to somebody. Like, I can't do this anymore. And Jay Bice yelled at me for like 30 minutes about how stupid I was. And you are not a rock star pastor, Kirk. You don't need, and like, dude, she went off on me for like 30 minutes. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was like, she's right.
She goes off on me all the time.
And she's
I
always
get it.
right.
Yes.
So like it is brotherhood. So we meet once a month. The South Georgia guys, we meet once a month. Every third Thursday, we all get together. It is very informal. Somebody will lead a quick devotional. We sing together, usually a couple of hymns, and then we just go around the room. We do a check-in. How are you? Like, what's really going on? And we always have to stop and say, all right, we have to eat lunch at some point, guys. Like, we gotta, because guys are just like, they'll just talk, and that
There's always one that limps in.
Always
one of us limping in.
Yeah. There's usually a couple of guys that are like, man, God's been so good that, this is going on. These people got saved. This person got baptized. We didn't believe that we were ever going to raise this amount of money to do this thing that we wanted to do for missions, but we did. God's so good. And then there's always a guy that's like, I hate everyone. I hate my elders.
When I get home, I'm quitting.
Yeah. I hate my elders. I hate my church. I hate my members. This thing is terrible. So it's like, it's having I think it's having that group of guys. But even like I was talking about Jay, like having the support for Chelsea as well, because Chelsea gets support from other pastors' wives as well, that talk her off the cliff, because there's been a ton of times when Chelsea's like, yeah, you should quit. And so it's like she needs that support just as much as I do, because if I'm mildly helpful on the stage during a sermon, or if I offer any type of good advice or support or spiritual help to anybody, it's because I have a solid base and foundation at home with Chelsea, that I'm moving out from into the world of ministry. Does that make sense? That is my of course my source is Christ and his gospel, but the greatest tool that the Lord has given me to do any good in ministry is having an awesome wife, and she gets that support from the other pastors' wives as well. And man, I feel terrible for anybody that has to do this alone.
Me too.
Any pastor, any wife that has to do this alone. It's already so isolating, and to not actually have a support system, I have no idea how anybody does it.
Me either.
Well, I think it's great that y'all had that need. So I don't know how those meetings started, but like having that need and saying, hey, this is something we need to do. Like that's very wise and good thing. And I think it's a great model for your members to look at that and say, hey, my pastor, he has a support group. He has these people that are reaching out to him and being there, like, and then modeling that for us to do that. Cause I feel like for our at GCC, it's like through community groups and DNAs, like that structure is there. Like that's something that is always preached at us, is that, have those people in your lives, having that support. Like it is very monumental, whether you're being a pastor or doing anything in life. Having people in your life is a good thing. Like we talked about in the podcast before, like the enemy wants us to be isolated. He wants us to get us alone and out of community and out of support and encouragement and stuff. So it's a beautiful thing that, God orchestrated it, that we need each other, to accomplish anything in this life. And so thank y'all for seeing that need and walking that out as leaders and letting us view that. I think it's a beautiful thing. So for anyone that, is hearing this and all this stuff like that, like, there's clear, obvious challenges of being a pastor and stuff, but is there anything that like, it would almost surprise people that y'all struggle with or challenge that y'all go through that congregations might have no idea about?
Yes.
Yeah, you go.
I might cry.
You can do that too.
Let it out, man.
I think deep pain that gets you get hit with, like wounds, I think. And I want to be careful how I say this.
This is a part of why I wanted you here.
So
Good support.
I'm afraid at times church members do not see any of their elders or pastors as a actual person. I think they see them as a figure without emotions, without having pain, and that's, but I think we're people. We have friends. We're normal. There's nothing special about us. I think it's a high calling that we've been called to, sure. And how people treat that relationship, church member to pastor, sometimes can be unbelievably painful. And I that's probably my biggest struggle, and it's probably what I've been tempted most by to leave the ministry, is just the amount of pain that comes at times. Now, don't get me wrong, there are so many times of joy and celebration, good things, God things, watching him show up and save people and work in their lives. I mean, that's what keeps me going. One of the many things that keep me going. But when you've poured your life into someone and they treat that as little value is very painful. But what do you do as a pastor? Do you get up and tell everybody, "Hey, guess what? More wounds this week, everybody."
Mhm.
No, you take the hit. And I think it's one of the ways in which we can be more like Jesus is take those hits, absorb them, for the good of his people, and the continuation of the gospel. That's one of the ways I have to look at it. I don't know. I want to be careful how I say that because I don't want it to turn into like this, pity party kind of thing either. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And we can, as pastors, sometimes have too much pity on ourselves and get in the dumps and all of that. And so I don't want to, but you asked.
Yeah.
You asked, and I'm going to be truthful and honest, and that's it.
Mhm.
Especially when you're close to people. When you're really, really close, and then it feels as if they've turned on you, betrayed you, left you, abandoned you, and it's your fault. That is the most painful thing. And the crazy thing is, in our position, it happens frequently. And so you're trying not to close your heart off to people. And that's hard.
Yeah. I would say, especially in the South, there is an unwritten expectation for pastors. So like it's almost you feel like I'm not saying this is true, but as a pastor, you feel like everybody in the congregation is coming in with a job description written for you that you don't know what's on that job description. So it's like people have expectations for you which you didn't sign up for. It's like I didn't sign up to be at every kid's birthday party all the time. Like I didn't sign up for that. So like, but people are offended that the pastor didn't come to their kids, softball game or whatever. It's like I didn't know that was on my job description. So there's a lot of expectation management, which is difficult. And I would say that what Tim is saying is like you can go one of two routes if you're going to stay in. Route one is to absorb the wounds like Christ, and when people betray you, when people question your leadership, when you say mask or no mask, vaccines or no vaccine, you make a political statement about whatever about how the kingdom of God is actually more important than either political party, and then whatever you get criticized for that. Harden your heart and just close yourself off to people and keep going, or absorb the wounds. Those are really the two options. And I think that if you're going to be a good pastor, you can't harden your heart and close people off. You have to care. And I think what people don't know or what people don't see is that you really are, if you're going to be a good pastor, you really do take on, not just when people criticize you or whatever, but when a parent in the church calls you and says, "I found out my son's been snorting Adderall," or whatever, like if you don't care, like if you don't feel that pain with that mother or with that father, you're not a good pastor, right? You have to care, but that happens all the time to us. Like people call us during the worst times of their life, when somebody dies, when there's drug addiction, when there's abuse, like they call us. And so to echo what Tim's saying, we signed up for this, right? We were
Yes.
called to this. We signed up for this.
Yeah.
We see the lowest of lows in people's lives, but we also get to see the highest of highs. We get to pray over the mom that, just had the baby, and they're excited about, this new life. We get there to pray over the guy that just got a promotion at his job. We get there to pray over the guy who is clean and sober for 60 days. Like we get to see the highest of highs, but we also experience the lowest of lows. And so I think that's why it's so critical, back to the health thing. It's so critical that we are healthy, because you have to be healthy in order to be able to ride that roller coaster, way high, so awesome. You have just the best meeting with somebody. You're so fired up and excited. And then 2 minutes later, your phone rings and you are at the bottom with somebody again.
Yes. And those lows, those bottoms are emotionally draining. So I've had death threats before. And those are easier to handle than the emotional pain of someone treating the relationship as less than
Mm.
that on those lowest of lows. And but at the end of the day, I think if you're called to it, God will sustain you. Keep your eyes on Him. Keep pressing forward and celebrate. We started celebrating things. I guess it's about 5 years ago. I was terrible at celebrating anything. You know, that's very, very helpful. I think families should do it, churches should do it, businesses should do it. But finding things to celebrate has been super helpful.
I was thinking too, because I know we're talking about like the hardships of being a pastor and stuff, and I think y'all kind of hit on it, where it's celebrating or finding the sweet moments. Like when I think of like Paul in the Bible, finding the joy in suffering. Like, have y'all seen that a lot in being a pastor? Like, hopefully the joy outweighs the pain more. Hopefully, but grace of God. But I don't know. How do y'all decipher those moments? Like, this embracing those joy moments in the suffering. Is that something you even think about, or is just like, here's the joy, here's the suffering? But like, are you able, even in just the chaos of being a pastor, to find the joy in the midst of the suffering, in the midst of all the hardships and the phone calls? Like, is it easy to find joy in those moments?
I wouldn't say that it's easy, but I think it's doable. And both of us have processes we enter into. Mine's called Fight for Joy. His is called Road to Recovery, where we are seeking joy that Jesus died to give us. So yeah, I think so. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's doable. Another way to do it is, even if we don't experience the joy we want to on this side, our eschatology tells us that there's unending joy, and that's what we're aiming for. So I think thinking about, new heavens, new earth, and our relationship with God through that is also helpful. And yeah.
I think the way that I try to find joy is reminding myself that in that moment of pain, whatever it is, wherever the source is, that in that moment, the Lord is counting me worthy to bear that burden for Him and for His church, and that brings me some sense of joy, and is very humbling when you think, I've just been stabbed in the back or wounded or lied about or criticized or whatever, and you go, yeah, but this was for the cause of Christ, and the Lord is asking me to do this. Is a wound that He's asking me to bear and to carry, because He is going to equip me, and He is counting me worthy to bear this pain and this burden. And I go, man, the master thinks I'm worthy. All right, let's go. I'll do it again another day.
My job. I like that a lot.
Or I'll text him,
Oh,
hey
yeah.
man, pray for me.
Yeah. Well, I imagine in your church, in the congregation, that you probably have people that are saying, "Hey, man, I'm feeling this calling, that I feel like I should the calling of a pastor." Like, how do you encourage that person? And also, if they say, "Where in the world do I even start? Like, what do I do?" Like, I imagine that, like I said, it's probably come up a few times. So how do y'all encourage people, and then where do they even start?
First of all, we want to see them faithful in their local congregation. And second thing is to take it slow. Third thing is this a calling? The way we do it, I think you might do it similarly. Calling is two parts. It's an inner conviction. I feel God calling me. There's a tug toward this. And then there's an outer commendation. Like, people are commending you. Like, I see God's hand on you. I think, you're a good shepherd, you're a good teacher, whatever it might be. And so you have to answer the call. The fourth thing would be training. I didn't get training. I just kind of stumbled through. I wish I had someone to train me, or a ministry to train me. And I think finding, whether it's your local congregation that you're a part of, or a church or pastoral residency, church planting residency, whatever it might be, or other good routes to go down. But I think those are the first few things I would say. But um, the way we do it at our church, we're constantly looking. We try to build a pipeline. We call ours a 10 cohort, where we invite guys in and their wives, spend 10 months with them. And then the last thing we do, the last month, is we talk about calling. We try to help them figure out what's God calling them. Are you to be a deacon? Are you to be an elder? Or maybe even a church planter? Like, what is your calling? And then after that, they'll have tracks they can go down to get the training they need. But we're with them every step of the way. Well, what I found, though, a lot of times is, especially with young guys, they get impatient. And I understand it, because I was one of them, and I got impatient, so I get it. And they just go off and do their own thing. And then most of the time they crash and burn. So if a man feels called, man, dude, please be patient. Let some people help you get some training. Get prepared, because it's not easy. It is. It is a lot of fun to preach when you're a lay person. It's awesome. There's nothing better. But when you get into the grind of pastoring and leading and in preaching, it's not the same thing. So just because you can preach good doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pastor well. So learning those kinds of things, I think that's a few little things that come to my mind right off the bat.
Yeah, I think like calling can be a little bit vague. There's a great book by Dave Harvey called "Am I Called?" And basically, what we've done in the past is, I have like a list of about 10 things, evidences that you are called. It's really nailing that down. So we'll go through that list with guys, to really kind of figure out, is this a real calling, not just I think it'd be cool to be a pastor. Like we really want to nail that down, so that it's not just kind of out there, in the wind. Like, yeah, I'm called. Like, okay, but are you? Let's nail that down. So we go through that process of helping guys discern that call. And I think anybody who's looking to start, again, your local church, start doing the work of the ministry. What's falling apart? What needs help? What ministries can you serve in? How can you help your pastors? A part of like getting elders on your elder board is looking around and asking the question, who's already eldering? So like, as I'm looking at community group leaders going, who's eldering? Like, who's doing the work without the title? And if I see guys doing the work without the title, like the two guys that we have, going through our candidacy process right now, they were doing the work. I'll name drop Phil Danford. We left an insanely difficult meeting. Church discipline, it was rough. It was terrible meeting. And we're sitting in the truck, and we're done with that meeting, and I'm sitting there with Phil, and I was like, dude, you just did the work of a pastor. You just pastored in a really difficult situation. You need to go through the elder process. And that was the genesis of it, because I just saw him doing the work. Like, come on, man, let's go. So that's how he got in the process. So I think, how do you get started? Just do the work of the ministry in your local church.
Yeah. And like, I think you just have to got it when you're talking about elders, like how important it is to have elders. I'm not sure how many Greenbriar has, but I know, like you said, we just have a couple that are just certain to go through that process and everything. Like, how important is it to have that? It's important to have the support of the pastors around, but like then having that tight knit of men around you as elders, helping you within your church. And if someone is saying like, well, I'm not called to be a pastor, but I'm called to be an elder. I mean, it might be the same thing. Sorry. But like, what is a biblical way of raising them up?
That's a good question. And I think that it's important that we are friends and we have support. It's biblical to have a plurality of elders. Almost every time you see elder or elders in the New Testament, it's plural. Titus, Paul says, Titus, appoint elders in every city. James, is any among you sick? Call the elders. And so every time you see it, just about, I think with the exception of once, it's in plurality. And so that's the first thing, is to realize this is God's design for a plurality of men who are called and meet the qualifications to elder. sometimes we turn elder into a verb to pastor, and appoint them, help them, train them. And so it's been one of the, I say it this way, because when we first planted our church, I was like the senior pastor, and we had like a board. It's called the advisory board. And then later on, I had 2 associate pastors. But then in 2012, I realized it was more biblical to have a plurality of elders who were equal. We have a first one among equals, which would be me as the lead pastor. But once we made that move, I tell people that's been one of the greatest gifts God has given to our church, is to have a plurality of the elders. And in the same way that if I didn't have these guys, I don't know if I would have made it. I think the same way, if we didn't have a plurality of the elders we have now, I would not have. I would have crumbled under the pressure. So it's pivotal, and it's biblical, and it's a gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift, God, to me personally, to one another, and to our congregation.
I understand why churches have a top-down CEO model. I understand, the senior pastor, like one guy at the top, he can hire, he can fire, he can make all the decisions. I understand that. When you give your life to this thing, you pour out your guts, you give it everything you got, and then I'm supposed to hand off control to these other elders? Heck no, man, this is my thing. I built this, it's scary handing off that control. But when you do, it is so freeing. It is so freeing to say, this isn't Pastor Kirk's church. This is not my church. This church belongs to the Lord. This is Jesus's church, and he is at the top of the org chart. Under Jesus, then there's a group of guys. And what happens is elders, there's a lot of things they do. Elders can protect the church from the pastor. So if I go on some crazy doctrine of heresy or whatever, those men are there to protect the church from me. I'm a liability, and they also are surrounding me and protecting me from those expectations I talked about before that people love to put on you. So it goes both ways. I definitely wouldn't be here without David Patton. I'm watching Phil Danford and Pete Walker. I'm watching those guys develop, and some of the things that they're implementing and instituting is so freeing. It's so life-giving. We have our meeting every Tuesday night. They come over to the house, their wives come over, the kids come over, and we have our meeting, we fellowship, our wives get together. I mean, without that support, I'm not here, man. I'm out.
Our elders, we're friends. They're not
Yeah.
my employees.
Right. We're friends. We
Yeah,
like to hang out
we do
together.
this together. We're on mission together to lead Greenbriar Church and plant more churches. That's what we're to do.
Mhm.
And we get to do it together. I get to do that with some of my closest friends.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
And even just outside of elders trickling down, as we kind of come to a close, what is a thing that, as a congregation, as a body, how can we be encouraging and supporting to y'all as pastors? What is something of course we can pray for y'all and stuff, which is number one, you should always do that. But what is something that we can do as a body that is encouraging to y'all, that can be helpful and supporting to y'all?
You go first. I'm going to read a scripture.
Oh,
I'm
man.
looking it up.
He's so spiritual. He's getting on the word.
Oh, I've got it now.
Go ahead.
I'm going to be you ask questions, I'm going to answer them, okay?
for it.
You
I
going
love it.
Hebrews?
Yeah. Yep.
I knew you were going
Uh-oh.
Hebrews.
12
Yep.
I'm just kidding. I don't know.
How many chapters in Hebrews? No.
13. Is it
Well,
12?
nice.
Is it 14, 12, 11?
Well, we're going to Hebrews 13.
Verse 17.
Verse 17, obey your leaders and submit to them, not to be subservient. That doesn't, pastors aren't masters. But listen to this, for they are keeping watch over your souls. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. We had to make some decisions on some of our music in our worship ministry. And I knew that some people were going to be happy about it and some people were going to be sad about it. And he's okay, but he wanted to voice some things to me, which I'm glad he did. And we made a decision, not out of preference, but out of conviction. And from this, I'm a watcher, one of the watchers over the souls of our congregation. Like I have to answer to that. And so when we make decisions as elders on things like what kind of songs should we sing and not sing, it comes from this. And I said, dude, I'm going to watch over your soul. And if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on the side of hopefully this deep conviction of protecting our congregation, you know. And so that's a heavy weight for us. It says, as those who will give an account. Now, this is the part you asked, and I'm going to answer it. Let them do this with joy. Please, for the love of God, let us do this.
Ooh, that's a tall order. Never mind. Take the question back.
Let them do this with joy, you know, and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. Congregation, that's who he's speaking to there. And so I'd say, man, if we're out of line, yeah, come to us. If we've made poor decisions, unwise decisions, absolutely. But man, like if we've got a track record of praying, being biblical, having integrity and character, we've displayed love over and over and over and over. If that's our track record, please let us do it with joy.
Mm-hmm.
It's no advantage to you if you don't, but if you do, like it comes back to you like a boomerang of joy, right? The more joyful we are, the more energy our church has, the more you feel that, you experience that. So that's what I would say. You asked, hey, you know what I'm saying?
love it.
You
Hey.
asked.
Yeah.
That's my
I
answer.
don't have anything to add to that. The congregation should watch their pastor's life. Watch his marriage, watch his parenting. Is he a man of integrity? Is he 1 Timothy 3, right? Do you see the biblical qualifications of an elder? Your pastor's never going to be perfect. But watch his life. And if he is a man of integrity, like Tim's saying, who has faithfully preached the gospel, who has loved his people well,
Who has repented?
who has
before,
openly
like,
repented
yeah.
From the stage.
Transparent.
Dude, I try to call myself out all the time on stage.
Yeah.
If that's who your pastor is, follow his leadership. Follow his leadership. When he says, man, I think as a church, this is what we need to do, go, heck yeah, how can I help? What you want me to do? I'm ready. Because like that's what Tim's saying. Like when you do that, then your pastor is fired up. He's like, man, my people love me and my people support me. I want to give more. And the pastor will just pour himself out more. You grow spiritually and support him and he supports you. And that's that symbiotic relationship that's supposed to be taking place instead of grumbling and griping and complaining. And, well, you know, they didn't call me and I wish I would have gotten this. And you didn't think about, you know, so on and so forth. When, man, what we get to do is so amazing. He doesn't need us to build the kingdom. Like he doesn't need me. He doesn't need Tim. He doesn't need you guys. But we're like called and invited into this thing that's going to last forever. Like this is amazing. Out of like all the things that we said, oh, it's difficult to be a pastor. Here's all the painful things. Here's the awesome thing. We're building something that's going to last forever and it's going to have a forever impact. So man, let's do it with joy. We should be fired up about this.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah, we were talking about doing this podcast. It was not, we didn't plan it. So it was, coincidence was definitely the Lord, but like this month is October and it's a pastor's appreciation month. And so like, we did not plan that. It was like, we just realized like, oh, that worked out great and stuff. But I just want to say personally, thank y'all from the bottom of my heart for just being open, being transparent, and just speaking your truth and just being real and raw. And so, and for people to hear that and be encouraged by that, whether they're feeling the call to be a pastor or just they are in a church sitting under pastors. And so I think y'all lead very, very well. And y'all are very wise in knowing the unhealthiness of things, seeing the hardships, seeing the good and the joy. So I think through this conversation, I think y'all exuded that of the goodness of our God and just how to walk out being a pastor. And so thank y'all for accepting that call and just leading your congregations so beautifully. So it's a beautiful thing. So
It gives me joy.
yeah, that's good. So like I said, as we come to a close, thank you everyone who has listened. We hope that this is an encouragement to you and a tool, not the main tool, but a tool that you can use. If you have any questions, if you're feeling the call to be a pastor and you're not even part of these churches, and you're like, hey, I have a lot of questions or I want to talk more about this, we have a wonderful email address.
Be Still and
Yeah.
Grow podcast at gmail.com.
And we'd love to be able to direct you, whether it's to Pastor Kirk, Pastor Tim, and just, help you out in any way. If you have any other questions or prayer requests, anything, we'd love to talk with you guys. So with that, we love you guys as always. Thank y'all for listening. Our Pastor Kirk, can you pray us out?
Love to. Lord, we love you. We love your church. God, what an amazing opportunity that we have to serve your church, to build your church, to be a part of this forever family and a forever kingdom. That what we're doing here really matters. We have meaning, hope, and purpose because you sent your son Jesus to die for sinners, not just individual sinners, but for those sinners joined together in a local context called the church. What an amazing thing that we get to be a part of this. And so, Lord, I pray now for congregations to be filled with joy and for their pastors also to be filled with joy as we do this great work. We ask and pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks for listening. Please email us at bestillandgrowpodcast@gmail.com with your questions, comments, ideas, and prayer requests.
For more content from Gospel Community Church, check out the Training Day podcast, hosted by George Jones
This is Catherine.
Heather?
and Nicole.
Join us next time. We'll save you a seat. Till then, be still and grow.